Hi, I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Wednesday, June the 29th. I'll start with news from a legal filing in Faulkner County Circuit Court. I mentioned it earlier this week. Attorneys for the estate of a woman who died in a nursing home in Greenbrier in 2008 filed a motion in court with 500 pages of exhibits this week to keep the case alive. The defendants want the case to be dismissed. This is the case in which Judge Mike Maggio has admitted he took a bribe in the form of campaign contributions to reduce a jury verdict from $5 million, $5.2 million to $1 million. They have brought a civil lawsuit against Maggio, who's been dismissed because he acted in his official capacity, and a nursing home owner and former Republican Senator Gilbert Baker for their actions in funneling money to Maggio to influence him in this case. They deny, of course, that that's what happened. What's interesting today are the depositions from Gilbert Baker, Michael Morton, and a slew of political figures, and it reveals the fairly grimy underbelly of Arkansas politics and the effort made by Michael Morton, an extremely wealthy nursing home owner, not only to put a lot of money in Mike Maggio's campaign for whatever reason, whether it bribery or otherwise, but to spend money across the judicial spectrum and in the legislature to try to bring so-called tort reform to Arkansas. That is, to make it harder to sue for damages when a nursing home is neglectful in taking care of a patient. One particularly interesting development is it turns out that there's sworn testimony now in this case that Michael Morton sent almost $50,000 in checks for the campaign of Rhonda Wood, now in the Arkansas Supreme Court, almost 5 months before you could legally raise money for a judicial campaign. She insists she had no knowledge of this, although there's ample evidence that she communicated regularly with Gilbert Baker, who was the bag man for Michael Morton and funneling money to a number of political candidates, including other judges, other legislative candidates. The depositions also reveal quite well Gilbert Baker's very friendly relationships with some key Republican legislators, some former, some current, Michael Lamro, Johnny Key, and Eddie Joe Williams, to name some familiar names. It's interesting reading deep stuff. There's not a smoking gun, I think it's fair to say, but it doesn't shine a very flattering light on the Arkansas judiciary. It does show that the FBI has interrogated and gotten information from a great number of people. We don't yet know if that investigation is over. There's some indication that it's still ongoing and perhaps is wider than simply the Maggio case. There may be other things as well. Sad news in Texarkana yesterday from my point of view. Voters there voted 3-1 overwhelmingly to repeal a city non-discrimination ordinance that said the city in its own employment and in dealing with companies should discourage discrimination against people on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. The usual myth about transgender people invading bathrooms was used to defeat the ordinance, and it's a sad commentary on how fear can defeat common sense. Texarkana voters say they favor legal discrimination against people based on sexual orientation. So far, Little Rock and Fayetteville are standing on the side of equity, and so there is that in Arkansas. Ted Suhl, the former operator of a multi-million-dollar mental health care corporation who faces trial in 2 weeks on bribery of state officials to help his business, filed an interesting motion in federal court yesterday, citing the very new decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in the case of the former Virginia governor. He says giving money to public officials isn't in and of itself a crime of any sort. It's just part of the way you do business in Arkansas or other politics, and of course that's certainly true. He says only if you show official acts in return for that money has something wrong been done. Sewell has a small problem in that we have 2 people, one a former state employee and the state legislator, and one a former city council member, who said they indeed did things for Sewell in return for money. They've admitted to bribery charges and are serving time in prison. So he might have a hard time getting Billy Roy Wilson to dismiss his charge, but we'll see. It's an interesting last-minute Hail Mary pass, if nothing else. An 8-year-old child skateboarding last night in the Meadowcliff subdivision was killed by a hit-and-run car. The driver of the car later turned himself in to police, and he's been charged with a felony count of leaving the scene of the accident. I had to chuckle this morning at Deadspin, the website that looks at a lot of sports information. They called it the Mount Rushmore of an alternative or horrific alternative universe, and that was Bloomberg's report on the slate of sports figures that Donald Trump had lined up to speak at his Republican National Convention coronation if it happens. They include a NASCAR CEO, Mike Ditka, Bobby Knight, and a convicted rapist, Mike Tyson. Trump has backed away from Mike Tyson, thinking that having a convicted rapist in a time when he's having trouble with women voters maybe wasn't the best idea. But he did say Mike Tyson's a great guy and would have been a great speaker. Bring him on, I say. no need to pull back now. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.